Hi, I'm here with Tim. Tim is a nutrition coach, and we're going to be talking about nutrition and possibly supplementing for different injuries. I see a lot of clients with different types of injury within my clinic, and I'm always interested to know how perhaps we should be eating when we're injured and we can't do quite as much. So we're going to have a look into that, as well as potential supplementation. I'm going to be picking Tim's brains about cramp, and also finishing off with some information about red S. Okay, so something that I see quite a lot in clinic with clients, particularly I guess with clients where their injury is significant enough where they have to drop down slightly or adapt their activity. So they're probably doing quite a lot less than they would. A key thing that I quite often see is that they have quite a lot of concerns over gaining weight or losing muscle mass.
Yeah.
So I guess really it would be really useful for me to know sort of directions to point them and tips and things to say to them in order to either put their mind at rest or some tips that they could use in order to either not lose muscle mass or not put on weight.
Yeah, sure. So obviously that's a big concern for a lot of people, especially if they're quite active. That might be part of the reason that they're really active, but it probably isn't the entire reason they're so active. They probably they're a triathlete. They probably genuinely love triathlon, and that's just a byproduct is the activity. They get to eat a bit more. They should be eating a bit more.
Yeah.
If they're mega active, then if that's changed because of the injury, and that depends, because they might still be able to do other things around that. If they're mega active, they might need to eat a little bit less, but that's all controllable. Depends how long the injury takes, and for anyone, regardless of how active they are, your body composition changes across the course of a year. Even mine does as a fitness professional. It happens, it's just life, and we get to control that. So it's always possible to lose weight. It happens quite quickly. So that's part of the piece of allaying any fears. But if you're injured, one of the most important things to be mindful of is to preserve your muscle mass, because you work really, really, really hard to get there in the first place. Develop your running, cycling, got stronger in the gym, put in a real good shift. So keep that in place, and that is definitely possible provided we make sure we train appropriately around the injury and keep training where we can, because normally it's not a complete zero training approach. And make sure that we get enough protein in our diet, because that really supports the preservation of that muscle mass, especially if we're not as active as we want.
So if we're talking, I guess we've got a lot of different types of athlete that we're dealing with, and certainly for me, I'm kind of looking at people that perhaps do boot camp on a regular basis, and therefore they're not going to get to do that anymore. Or you've got your other end of the spectrum of a triathlete. But I guess the message is still pretty similar in terms of maintaining muscle mass. I think what I see with sort of the person that enjoys, they're active because they really enjoy it, but there is an aesthetic element to what they do. They're only out for a few weeks. There's only going to be a few weeks difference. What's the chances of the fact that they've gained fat in that kind of time?
So that's a great point, and gaining any type of body tissue takes a long time. It takes at least 2 weeks of consistently eating more calories than you burn to build fat tissue. Muscle tissue takes similar, if not longer, in terms of having a sustained effort of building it. So if you're not going on an all-out attack on the biscuit tin, and kind of, this is where like psychology comes into a little bit, because you could, as you said, like really enjoy what they're doing, try and avoid getting down in the dumps, resorting to comfort eating, be mindful and conscious of that. But it's really, really hard to gain any significant fat in over the course of a couple of weeks, because you need to be in a calorie surplus for all of that time. What will happen is when your activity levels change, your body water storage would change. If you eat differently, your body water storage would change. So when you step on those scales, it's going to give you a number that you may or may not like.
Yeah.
Don't let that number get into your head. So what I say for all of my clients when we're working on fat loss and actually even more importantly when we're working on muscle gain, we look at the scales because it's valuable data, but take a tape measure, put it around your tummy button and measure that weekly. That tells you what your body fat's doing.
Okay.
If your tummy's going up significantly over 2, 3, 4 weeks, then maybe we need to dial the calories down a little bit.
Right.
If it's not, you're not gaining any fat regardless of what the scales say, and that's where like 2 kind of sets of data really help us to rationalise that. I use it all the time in people who are too afraid to eat more to get bigger. I would use it with someone who's injured as well to give them the reassurance that they're not gaining fat regardless of what the scales say.
That's really, really useful. Because I would say, I guess for them a good thing to understand is that how much has that boot camp class a couple of times a week actually contributed to that calorie either deficit where they've been losing weight or now is it going to be a big contributor now that they're not doing it to a calorie surplus?
Yeah, and that's a great point, and it really does depend. So we've given 2 examples, and the example of someone doing a boot camp a couple of times a week is fantastic for your health, your bone mass, your cardiovascular health, getting out and seeing people, so many great benefits to that. It's not a great way to get yourself in a calorie deficit, especially if you're not mindful of calories, because often you go do the boot camp, you're hungry afterwards, you feel you've earned it, you eat a bit more. Like if there's no parameters around it. Realistically, it's 200 to 500 calories a session, and 500 calories in a boot camp session, you're working hard. Most people are going to be 200-300 because you're changing stations, you're having a chit chat, you're not working all of the time. Your smartwatch is going to give you a completely different number. That number's wrong.
Okay.
If you're a triathlete, then your energy output is big. You're on the bike for an hour, you're working continuously for an hour. That number on your smartwatch is much more accurate because it's based off your heart rate.
Okay.
And so when you're in a class, your heart rate stays up,
high. Right,
but you're resting and your heart rate's still up. But think of it like the odometer or the mileage counter on your car keeps ticking. But you're not burning those calories. It's just that's why the watch doesn't work for fitness classes, but it does work for endurance and it's useful for that triathlete. But you'll see our bike ride's like 700 calories maybe, depending on the person and stuff. So it's a big difference, and it's the people who do that mega long activity that need to be more mindful of it. And so boot camp, just think about that's enriching your strength and your fitness, enabling you to burn more calories because you're more active in other parts of the day.
So actually a lot of it is the change in frame of mind. So when I'm working with clients, I'm very much trying to adapt activity. So if there's something they can't do on feet, can we take them off feet? If I know about the boot camp class, then we can work as to what activity within it they can do. Or are there other sessions that they do outside of boot camps, not necessarily just that, but do they swim, do they... and I tend to do that a bit more, I guess, from maintaining cardiovascular, but maintaining strength everywhere else. But I guess from the perspective that you've just been saying about food, it's maintaining that frame of mind, that feeling good in yourself, meaning you make healthier choices.
Absolutely that, And I was going to say exactly the same. It's that mindset of the routine of doing fitness, because often it's very common, someone comes to me as a nutrition coach and a PT, they'll want one or the other to start with. They'll want nutrition advice or they'll want fitness advice, fat loss or muscle, and they want to drive that from nutrition or from exercise first. Now fat loss is always going to be driven more by nutrition, but I'll still say, well, okay, you're here, let's go exercise. Because then as you get into it, the other thing comes along for the ride, because then you get in that rhythm and routine. So it's so important to keep going and do what you can around it. And again, stops that feeling of like, oh, I can't do anything, I'm off the wagon now, just go and do whatever.
So then going to the same kind of thing, but opposite end of the scale. So where you've got athletes that are training for a performance goal. And I would say that potentially, thinking of clients that I have, it isn't necessarily that they sort of sit in one camp where they're worried about muscle loss or fat. There's a real mixture within my clients there. So do they, I think you touched upon it earlier about they need to think a bit more about calorie changes because their activity is so much more demanding. So would they be looking at perhaps changing of macros within those calories or just reducing them?
I would say keep it simple.
Yeah.
So reduce the calories, but focus on, and this is like the level of importance. So calories are the most important variable in your diet. That's the biggest piece of the puzzle. Yeah. Even if you're focusing on proteins, carbs, and fats very closely, you can still default to calories on a day where you don't want to track them. Whatever. That's the baseline. Get that right. Then for everyone, it's protein next. Rough rule of thumb: take your height in centimeters, take away 100. Okay. It's going to give you your ideal body weight. Yeah. Right. Oh, so okay. I'm 180 centimeters ish. I'm like 180. So my ideal body weight is 80. Okay. My protein requirements are then based around that ideal body weight. Right. Anywhere from 1.6 grams to 2.2 grams of protein per kilo of that ideal body weight. Right. I've set myself up about 1.8 at the minute. I do strongman, but I'm also in a calorie surplus, so that matters. If we're trying to lose fat, we're going to be strength sports 2.2, non-contact sports 1.6, endurance 1.6. But yeah, so you could be anywhere in that range. So that allows you for personal taste. But get that bit right, then the fats and carbs can just be down to personal taste. Because calories, protein next, that's going to be some of your calories, 4 calories per gram of protein in your diet. Fats and carbs, doesn't matter what those ratios are because they all add up to the calories at the bottom piece of the picture. Okay.
So there would just be overall, just looking at reducing overall calorie and maintaining protein high to maintain muscle mass.
And in general, if you knock your calories down significantly, take them away from carbs because you need the fats in there for hormonal function. Okay. But if you just eat smaller portions of the stuff you normally eat, that's going to look after itself. Right. But if you really want to get into it, take it away from the carbs if you're not doing loads of activity, because they're there for the fuel. You still want some because of fibre, stuff like that. 25 to 35% of your overall calories should be from fat. Okay. That's again a rule of thumb, and that allows for personal preference. There's no magic number there. Yeah.
And I suppose it's also important to go into a bit of detail about what we're talking about here with regards to reducing calories if you are injured, because there's a lot of different categories, I guess, where you've got somebody who has a tendinopathy, who perhaps we need to reduce their run volume, but actually we're managing to keep up a lot of other volume elsewhere. Yes. So perhaps their calorie reduction isn't necessary for that. No. And then you've got an opposite end where perhaps you've got stress fracture and they're in a boot on crutches. So being able to actually replace the running that they would have been doing is then quite difficult, perhaps for a short period of time until they're in the pool and jogging and that kind of thing. So what impact would you say being in a boot and being on crutches would have on how much, you can't quantify exactly how much, but they would need to reduce, and is there anything they need to be thinking about?
Yeah, sure. So it depends what they were doing already, but putting that to one side, if you ever tried to get around on a set of crutches, it's really hard work. Yeah. You're burning a lot of calories by hauling your body about on your arms because you're not used to that. So whilst you've done less activity elsewhere and your heart rate's not going, you're not getting sweat on, you're working really hard. So in that instance, you may even be burning more calories at rest outside of your gym sessions than you will be burning more calories at rest outside of your gym sessions, because getting up and going to the loo is much harder than it was before you had the injury.
Yeah.
One thing with calories actually, which kind of made me think, Danielle was talking there, is I would love it if someone's injured to just get down to or get at their maintenance calorie level.
Okay.
Maintenance calories is the amount of calories you need to stay the same body composition, to not put on fat.
Yeah.
If we're there, we're A, not going to put on fat, which is one of the goals. B, protect our muscle, because being in a calorie maintenance or a surplus is protective of muscle as well as the protein. If we can get ourselves in that position and get through the injury 4 weeks, and then we can deal with any fat gain that we might have had, but you won't gain fat if you're at maintenance. And if you think about it, and I don't really want to go into all the science, so I don't understand it that well, but having enough fuel in your body has to help tissue repair, has to help cellular repair, has to. So why not get yourself to a level where your body's got everything it needs to get you back to training sooner, rather than say, oh, I really don't want to gain any fat, I'll stay in a slight deficit and delay the point where you can then get back into training and start getting better. Yeah.
So there's obviously, and I don't know if there's anything quantified in research for this necessarily, but there's an element of an increase in calorie demand for healing.
Yes. Yeah.
To take place. So certainly being injured and training less, you're looking for your maintenance, but absolutely never wanting to be into your deficit, because you've got healing to take place, you've got muscle mass to maintain. So yeah, finding that maintenance is a really good point. That would be really useful, I think.
And if you, like, for those watching, if you've got a history of dieting and you've always been in a diet, the best way to get out of that is to learn what maintenance is like. Track calories, get that. It's a skill in itself to be able to maintain, because that's what happens. Like, if you're dieting, the point isn't to diet forever, else you'd literally waste away to nothing. So it's a useful skill in and itself, because everything in nutrition is based around that. Like, this is the core of where I'm the same. If you want to grow muscle, well, we go above that. If you want to lose fat, we go below that. How do you know you're there? Again, it comes down to data, basically. So has my average weight changed in the past 2 weeks? 4 weeks if you're female and have a menstrual cycle, because water retention really affects that. Has my stomach measurement, I talked about earlier, tape measure around the belly button, has that changed over the course of 2 to 4 weeks? If those numbers are going down, you're not quite eating enough to be at maintenance. If they're going up, you're eating a little bit more. So now you know what to do.
And do you think perhaps if you're not wanting to track and measure and like, is there something that people can follow? I'm kind of thinking a bit like that flapjack, or we'll get into what's a good post exercise, Yazoo or something anybody has. Could it just be about just not having that? Like with just... So if you're talking only a couple of 100 calories for some, it's just about not feeling like you need to supplement that session. Like, that maybe didn't happen.
So one of the coaches that I follow online, Jordan Sire, has a great rule where he talks to his clients about the 3 plates, 2 snacks rule.
Okay.
So he's basically like, and a lot of his clients are fat loss clients, but it works for everyone. I'm going to have 1 serving at each meal that fits on 1 plate. 3 meals, I'm going to have 2 snacks that fit in the palm of my hand. That's it. Simple as that. Gives you structure, gives you accountability. Stops you having 4 snacks. Stops you having, put on top of that, I'm going to drink at least 3 500ml bottles of water a day, more if you're bigger. Keep it that simple.
It is about following the basics.
Yeah.
Isn't it?
We can then, like, if you want more structure around that, you want to start then, if you've got into that and that's working, think about a dinner plate. Put half of that dinner plate green leafy vegetables, 1/4 of it protein, so chicken, fish, eggs, tofu, beans, pulses. The other 1/4 is our carbohydrates, bread, pasta, rice, cereals. Small dot in the middle of the plate, about the size of your thumb, is your fat portion, so oils, nuts and things like that. That gives you a more advanced structure, but you're still not tracking calories. You've just got a plan of action of what belongs on that plate.
So I guess going along that line to sort of going a bit more into detail about the what you're having, is there anything to support different macros or even supplementation based on different injuries? So kind of your tendinopathies or your standard sprains and strains, stress fractures. Is there anything?
In the reading that I did around it, I think the variable to be mindful of is the protein intake. Keep that constant, because protein isn't just muscle, it's all of the cellular repair in our body. It's hair, skin, nails, teeth, hormones, it's everything goes into that. Being mindful of the balance of our macronutrients and saying we really want to get that 25 to 35% of calories from fat in our diet, which is 1 to 2 thumb-sized portions a meal. That's going to help. Half an avocado. That's going to give us the nourishment, everything that our body needs to do the stuff. Your body's also going to take from what it's got stored to try and make up those energy sources, so it might be able to take from our fat a little bit. The reason to keep our protein up all the time is because we don't want our body to start because we haven't got enough calories in the system to start taking away from our protein sources to make energy. It will look for other places first, but we don't want to start our body saying, right, we need to fix this now because we've got a broken leg, or we've got, this is, in evolution, this is life-threatening. That limb is not working. We're going to die because we can't go hunt any food. So I'm going to start taking some muscle tissue away to fix that. It's like an emergency repair. That's why we need to keep the protein high.
From a tendon perspective, I get a lot of clients asking about supplements and collagen being a key one that they mention. It's also interesting for me because I have to say, I quite often, if I see someone for a tendinopathy, I'll quite often see them again for a different tendinopathy. Now, I know there are various reasons for that, but it was interesting to know if there's anything that perhaps is missing from their diet, or if those supplementations do make any difference.
Yeah, so I did a bit of research into the collagen part of it, and to be honest, the evidence is lacking. And it's possibly more to do with the other amino acids in collagen. I can't remember the glycine. Yes, glycine. That's a good prompt.
When we've talked about that before.
Yeah. So what a lot of the research did point out, and again, it's not proven, and some sports scientists see promise in collagen and others don't, but the glycine content is quite high, and glycine has a lot of research behind not necessarily research, but it makes a lot of sense to sports scientists. It's actually the glycine that's helping, and glycine is slightly, as I understand it, it's a slightly cheaper supplement. So why not cut to the root cause and maybe go down the glycine route? The thing with supplements though is, it's exactly what it says on the tin. It's a supplement. So I talked about calories, protein, carbohydrates and fats. We think of it as like a pyramid of importance, with calories being the bottom layer, which is the most important because it holds everything up. Supplements come right at the top of the tree. They're the last thing to think of. So if we've got an adequacy of protein sources that we need and the amino acids that are in that collagen, if we've got an adequacy of glycine in our system, because we've got a very well-rounded healthy diet, we're looking after our rest, recovery, rehab, all of that stuff, it's a little 1, 2, 3% at the end of the thing. If we're not doing any of those other things right, slamming in the collagen is going to do nothing, even if it was really effective, because your body needs everything to be where it needs to be at, and the biggest rocks you should always move first.
Okay, good. Get the basics in there. If another very specific one, which I particularly didn't mention within all of that group, is cramp. huge issues with cramp within sort of client base that I see, marathon runners, triathletes, experiencing cramp, and we know that it's hugely multi-dimensional. Like the reasons for it there's rarely ever one single reason for cramp, like muscular fatigue and dehydration and all of your electrolytes and everything coming into that. But how do you see that from a nutritional perspective? What should they be thinking of?
Yeah, so nutritionally, it's about electrolyte balance.
Okay.
It's about sodium potassium balance. It's not just about salt.
Yeah.
Sodium potassium balance is the ratio of those two things lead to adequate hydration. If it shifts one way too far, the other way too far, we're not optimally hydrated. You're trying to get enough of both so that it works.
Yeah.
How do you do that? Partly from our diet. So if we cook all of our foods at home, or the majority of them, we shouldn't be afraid of putting salt on those foods because they have none, and you need the sodium. That's where it comes from. It's an essential nutrient. You need some. If you're having pre-prepared meals, ready meals, eating out often, it's that chef's job to make them tasty, so they put salt in already. So just be mindful that it's already there and salt it. But if we eat lots of foods that we prepare ourselves, which we should all do really if we can, put a little bit of salt on it. Potassium can come from elements of the diet. If you're a sports person, and we talk about, I think there are two supplements I would go to for any people who are relatively serious about their sport. It'd be a protein supplement because you need to get enough in, and it's cheaper than buying meat. And an electrolyte. I have like a powdered one that comes in a packet, really cheap supplement, good value for money, tastes great. Have it just before training. If you're doing endurance, have it to sip on during your ride. It's going to give you that sodium potassium balance. The other thing to say with sports people is even if you're doing triathlon and stuff, dehydration ruins your concentration. It leads to early onset of fatigue. So it's just going to make you perform better. I work with Guildford Cricket Club. The first team there, when we give those guys electrolytes in the drinks and the game, they just all feel better for it. And most people aren't that great with getting enough overall hydration in because we're all busy, but it's important, especially if you're suffering from cramp.
So a big thing is that balance, because I probably would say from experience of chatting to people that suffer with cramp, the salt is the first thing that they think of and go to, but actually could they be making the situation worse by adding salt if there's not a balance, if it's not balanced with the potassium?
Yeah, exactly that, and that comes from having a wide variety of fruits and vegetables and all the different colours if you're doing it from your diet. But if you're struggling, give the electrolyte a try.
At least the balance is in there.
Yeah, there's no real disbenefit to having one a day in and around training. And see how you feel for it, because it does make a big impact. And I personally found I used to suffer with cramp a lot playing cricket, and I'm stronger, better running mechanics than I used to, but I think my hydration, whilst I used to hydrate with loads of water, that wasn't helping my on the pitch hydration, because if you drink just plain water, it flushes through. And you
I was about to say, that's my next question, is can you kind of over hydrate?
Absolutely, yeah. So especially so you're looking for your weed to be a very light straw colour rather than crystal clear. If it's crystal clear, you're a little bit overhydrated. So that's the indication that we're looking for.
Yeah, well, that's really interesting, helpful. Because I would say, sort of from my perspective, it's the strength and then looking at the fatigue and mechanically how they're moving, because calf cramp is probably one of the biggest. So actually throughout that chain of the leg when they're running, are they utilising a lot of calf, doing a lot of work through the calf and not enough further up the chain?
So
those muscles.
It's almost an overcompensation, tiredness, it's creeping in when
ankle instability, where they're just having to work so hard every time they hit the ground, so that calf's having to work even harder. But I would always say to them, like, I think nutrition would probably be above that, because I see a huge number of people that have an imbalance, not the right word, but like the mechanics of the leg are not absolutely perfect. They're not got that that glute, that triple flexion, that triple
Yeah.
extension to go off, but they don't suffer with cramp. So there's obviously something else going on. So nutrition.
Agree. I quite often see PT clients. I keep electrolyte in my studio because I quite often see PT clients and they cramp very early in the session. It's because they've drunk nothing all day.
Oh, okay.
So
So
and then it becomes
that
a rule
sort
with
of
them.
rules out fatigue and
To a degree, they're slightly undertrained, but like we now have a rule
nutrition.
where it's like they turn up, we have a chat, we have a drink, then we go into the session.
That's a good idea,
Just knowing your clients and all that. But again, like if you're going to go train, just get some hydration in you before you go out. Even if it's just water, just make sure there's some hydration.
Yes, yeah. And then one thing I really wanted to pick your brains about, which is kind of the opposite way around, I guess, to what we've been talking about, where we've talked about sustaining an injury and then needing to eat correctly, and we've gone through that. I wanted to talk about RED-S, so the relative energy deficiency in sport.
Yes.
And how, from my perspective, it's something whereby actually the nutrition, I would see people that are often injured, so stress fracture being a huge one that I would see in clinic, whereby actually the nutrition element means that they are energy deficient, and that's then causing the changes in hormone levels, which then have an impact on bone health and that kind of thing. So from your experience, what might someone's diet look like, I guess, that is in danger of suffering from an energy deficiency?
That diet would look like somebody who is afraid to eat for fear of fat gain. And I say that with a lot of love because I've been in that exact position myself. It's called RED-S these days. Used to be called the female athlete triad. Lots of symptoms around everything that Danielle describes. It used to be called the female athlete triad because one of the symptoms is loss of menstrual function, because your body's basically shutting down. It's saving energy from functions that are natural and healthy because you're in a starvation mode and you don't know what it feels like when you're in it. You almost have to go through it and come out of it to realise. But you haven't got enough food on your plate. There's no useful advice I can give you around that, so I'll give you the advice. There is useful advice around what you can have on your plate, but knowing the type of person that will be in that situation, you're not going to listen to eating more. The symptoms are, your training absolutely sucks. It's really, 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 really hard. You're mentally very strong and you push yourself through it. You look around the room in the class, no one is working as hard as you, but everyone's doing better than you. You're not adding any weight to the bar in the gym over any period of time. You might occasionally hit a new personal best with something every couple of months. You're constantly tired, agitated, irritable. You are always hungry, but you've trained yourself to not listen to that. You get injured often. It takes a long time to recover. You don't sleep very well. All of those things are big symptoms of having RED-S. And it comes down to, am I happy with the thing that I love, which is training and exercise, being wildly compromised by that? Am I happy with putting in hours and hours and hours of effort and getting very little reward? Am I happy with the output because all of that effort doesn't deserve a tiny little reward? And I think that is, for me, and from personal experience, that's where the switch flicks, but it's hard. And the things that help to come out of it are to have that in mind, have where you want to be, that better version of yourself, if you like, and say, I will literally just eat an extra slice of bread today across my main meals. I will have 50 extra calories this week, then I'll have 50 more the next week, and do it very, very slowly. There's no biological reason to do that. You can shift straight up to maintenance, but it's a big psychological one. Things will happen slower, but you've got to start somewhere, and if it's more comfortable for you, make tiny little steps, but fuel yourself. Then what happens is we fuel ourselves, our gym performance increases. Sometimes the mindset improves around it and we don't mind carrying a little bit more fat. What will normally happen is we'll get a bunch of extra water retention, we'll think we've got fat. Keep using that tape measure. Set yourself a 30-day challenge where you just do it for 30 days, knowing you're really good at losing fat and you can always go back to it. 30 days sensibly, small increases, take the tape measurements, push yourself, challenge yourself to eat a little bit more. As your performance increases, running, cycling, in the gym, your body composition will get better, you will gain more muscle, you will look better in your own skin. So you'll carry a bit more body fat, but you'll fill it out much better and you'll just look like you lift and train rather than just looking skinny. And that's, again, not trying to be harsh with that, that's just from my personal perspective. I've got some photos of myself in those two situations that I'm more than happy to share, and maybe we can get them put into the video just to show the difference of thinking I'm doing the right thing and being under lean, and fueling myself, being slightly higher body fat percentage but actually looking like a train.
I think those symptoms that you pointed out when you first started talking then are so important, because you've highlighted a type of person and probably that sits in that category more readily. But actually, I think you kind of also see people that don't mean to be in an energy deficiency, and perhaps have spent a lot of their life dieting. Or have gone through the period of time where fats were the enemy. And they've just got used to eating less, and then have found a love of running. I'm going to go boot camp again, where you have that higher intensity impact work from boot camp is where I would see bony injuries taking place. And you've just got people that are not necessarily not necessarily you were suggesting that these people had an eating disorder, but it's about disordered eating.
There's a spectrum of that. 100%.
Exactly. Or just they don't even realise they've got disordered eating because it's just something that's developed over time of having to diet a bit and having to reduce calories, and then when you're training and you're feeling really good, sometimes it's even easier to drop those calories back because you're not comfort eating and doing all those things. So those points that you made just about the performance being lower and kind of looking around and being like, I'm working really hard here and nothing's happening, because also I don't necessarily think people can always be visibly, you're not thinking, someone that's suffering with Red S isn't necessarily looking frighteningly thin.
No.
So therefore there's nothing to, you probably, like you say, there is a difference between that energy deficient composition, which is thin and might be what people have been aspiring to I've been training, I'm looking muscular, but in a really healthy way, and those photos would probably be really useful.
I'm happy to share those.
There is a difference.
And I share those with my clients. There's a lady I've been working with who's CrossFit. She's very, very lean, really struggles with her CrossFit performance, and we had this whole conversation where I talked about that experience. And what happens when you fuel yourself is there's a point where literally the handbrake comes off. And you go to do something hard in the gym or in your training, and you're like, God, it was hard, but it was so much easier today. And then it happens again, and you're like, oh yeah, and then it happens again, and you're like, it's the food. And then then you're able to train harder, and then you hit the next plateau, and that handbrake comes back on again, and you're like, oh no, I need to eat a bit more still. And then there's this positive spiral that comes, and she's seen incredible improvements in her CrossFit performance. She's still really, really struggled with that body image. But it's about having that end in mind, and we did the 30-day challenge with her, and it really helped her, because she said, I know I can do this for 4 weeks, and if I don't like it, I know after 4 weeks I'm not going to do it again. And actually what happened after 4 weeks is we kept going, because she's similar age to me, and there's a lot of younger people in her CrossFit box, and it's quite nice for her to sort of like now be able to actually beat them at some stuff, which she should be able to do because she's much more experienced, but she's been holding herself back with her food subconsciously. And I guess the other thing to say is, if you don't, if the risks are that you have that very high end, so if we're not necessarily too worried about food, the other risk is like you've got a very, very high energy output because you're playing very high level sport and you're training maybe 3 times a week, playing 2 games at the weekend. That's a lot of calories burnt. Or we're doing endurance activity. That's a lot of calories burnt in anything over an hour continuous, running, cycling, swimming, lots of calories burnt. We need to put those back. If you're in the endurance camp, look at your Strava, look at your smartwatch, see how many calories it tells you burn. You don't burn quite that many, but you burn like 90% of them. So if you've done 4 hours cycling at the weekend, you need to eat some big meals that weekend to put back the fuel if you're lean already.
Yes, that's brilliant. Thank you very much.
Okay.
It's been a pleasure talking to you.
And you.
Thank you very much for listening. I really hope you found that useful. I certainly did. So thank you very much. If you wanted to contact me on Instagram. I'm at DS Sports Therapy. Tim, do you want to, if you wanted to contact Tim?
Yeah, if you want to get in touch with me, I'm at Food Flexibility on Instagram, Facebook, or you can email me tim@foodflexibility.co.uk.
Or you can email me too, Danielle at dssportstherapy.co.uk.